Welcome back to part 2 of the chicken coop and garden build. Part 1 of this project was focused on building a chicken coop in our suburban Melbourne backyard. I made a video on that too, and you can watch it on my channel by clicking the link in the description. I started this build by taking apart our old garden beds. These served us well for about 2 years, but we've definitely outgrown them. I wanted to reuse the beds themselves, so once I emptied them, I moved them further apart so that I could build another bed down the back to give us 3 meters of extra space, and somewhere to place a greenhouse. I started by using 2-meter boards, which were 200 by 45 millimeters in thickness, connecting the two beds together. I marked out where I needed to cut so that a standard size greenhouse will fit. I've then gone ahead and used 500mm lengths of the same boards to close off the sides of this extended bed. This resulted in an L-shaped garden bed, which I replicated on the other side. Before I start to frame up the walls on this new garden space, I put down some H3 treated boards on the exterior of the garden so that I can sit my frame on top of that. The reason for this is to keep our wall frames off the ground, and it keeps it aligned and aesthetically similar to the chicken coop. Unfortunately, the weather was not my friend on this day, but this is what we were left with when we finished up. Picking up where I left off, I started by cutting out 900 millimeters of the board which I installed yesterday. This is where I'll be installing a door. I spent the rest of the day backfilling the soil from the original garden beds. It was still in pretty good condition and we had plenty of it. I then stained all of the new pieces of timber with the same cedar color which was used in the chicken coop. I didn't bother painting over the old beds as they won't be that visible once the exterior frame is up. I learned a thing or two about painting during the coop build and opted to paint the timber for the project before installing the frame. Once again, our exterior frame is being painted in a Dulux Classic cream color. Once the paint was dried, I built the frame with the same process we followed in the chicken coop build. It's a very straightforward process, and all we did was build the frame according to the length of the garden beds. If you haven't seen how that's done, watch the first part of this video for the full explanation. The second panel goes up in the exact same way, and I'm using temporary supports to hold them in place. Again, placed on top of the garden bed and secured down with screws. You'll notice that the height of these walls is in line with the height of the walls of the coop. I just won't be replicating the pitched roof. The top of the whole structure will be covered with chicken wire to enable the sun to shine through. As I'm joining these two walls together, you'll notice my cat Bruce has joined me to help out. And you'll also notice he quickly changes his mind. Anyway, I'm not sure what happened in the next series of clips. They were a little overexposed and bright. Next up, I'm installing a slightly smaller panel to the ones at the back, keeping in line with the depth of the garden bed. Using the same technique again, a bigger panel goes up to match up with the length of the bottom piece of timber. Once again, these temporary bracings are there to hold the wall while I fix it in place. Then I'm going in with some 90mm screws to join these two walls together. Before I move on to the last wall, I use my nail gun to add pieces of timber diagonally in the top and bottom corners of these walls. This is mostly for aesthetic purposes, but also adds some additional strength and prevents the timber from bending or sagging over time. I then framed up the last wall and secured it to the coop. Before moving on to the roof joists, I added a top plate between these two pieces of timber, which will form up a door frame. I then moved on to the roof and began screwing in the roof joists. These are spaced 900mm apart. I used 7 pieces of timber for roof joists, and the 900mm spacing made it a lot easier to install the chicken wire along the top. This is because the chicken wire is exactly 900mm in width, and we can simply overlay them as we go. Next, I installed the chicken wire on the top. As I said, the spacing was ideal and made it very easy to roll out. Then secure them down with galvanized button screws. I then repeated that all the way to the end. We opted to enclose our garden mostly due to pests. We're in pretty close proximity to reserves and parks and often get a lot of possums during the night. The last step was to finish the door. I followed the same bracing which you saw on the chicken coop, which meant the gate won't sag over time. You'll notice the door is a little bit further off the ground. There's a reason for that, and you'll see it at the end. Now it's time for some finishing touches. I painted the chicken wire black, which many will already know makes the mesh invisible from afar. It made a huge difference, and we also did the same for the chicken coop. And here is the finished product. You'll notice that there is a stained fascia around the top of the roof. I didn't get a chance to film this, but I simply used some fence palings, which I fixed into place. I also added some solar hanging lights at the front and some string lights inside, which lit up the feature at night. We popped a greenhouse in the middle, and my wife is working on growing some new seedlings. I laid some pavers down to keep this space nice and tidy, and also concreted a ramp in to allow for things like wheelbarrows to go in easily. And this is how the project turned out, the coop and garden side by side. We're loving spending time with the chickens and also out in the garden. Be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, I look forward to bringing some more ideas and projects to you.